Hi, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to today's Solenis Insight webinar series titled Autonomous Chemistry Control Using Optics Applied Intelligence. I am Beth Ann Zarko, Product Marketer for Solenis Digital Solutions, and I will be your facilitator for today's meeting. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today and hope that you'll find this presentation insightful. Before we get started, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. Please keep your line muted during the presentation. We will have about 20 minutes at the end for Q&A following the presentation. At that time, you can unmute your line to ask a question or just simply type your question in the chat window, and you can find the icon on the toolbar. It looks like a little thought bubble or message icon, and you'll be able to chat or type through your question in that chat panel. If you have any questions during the presentation, you're welcome to type them in the chat and we can approach those questions at an appropriate time. This webinar is being recorded and a copy will be shared on solenis.com. So you'll be able to replay it at your own time and speed. At this point, let me introduce Matt Callicott. He is our product launch manager for Solenis Digital Solutions team. For the last 4 years, he has supported the development and launch of Optics Applied Intelligence. Since joining Solenis in 2014, Matt has worked closely with paper and tissue producers across the globe. Prior to joining the Digital Solutions team, he held a position as sales account manager for the pulp and paper industry. A proud graduate of Georgia Institute of Technology, Matt has a Bachelor's of Science degree in Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering. At this time, I'll hand it over to Matt.
Thank you, Beth Ann, and thank you for everyone that can join us today. What we'll be going through today is some results. There we go. Around the autonomous control piece that Solenis has been rolling out with the Optics platform. This is a similar presentation to what was shared with our TAPICON presentation this year and should be shared as well at the live presentation. And it was shared in conjunction with our partner, St. Croix Tissue, and their operations manager, Jesse Stevens. Jesse wasn't able to join us today, but he was able to record some stuff that we have then attached to the presentation. So you'll get to hear in his own words how it has successfully improved his process, as well as his path forward on what are the next opportunities for him. So here's a brief agenda that we'll go through. We'll quickly cover kind of the intro of optics, where we started, the path through where we went and where we are now, cover kind of what the autonomous control piece is, how it works and what it does, and then finally get into really the meat of it, the case study, what we've been doing at St. Croix Tissue to use AI to optimize their chemistry dosage, to better hit their targets, and to overall improve the digitization and optimization of their process. As Beth Ann mentioned, we'll have time for Q&A at the end, so please enter your questions in the chat and we'll get to them as they come up. There we go. So why advanced analytics? We all hear the term Industry 4.0. It's a common buzzword that's thrown around from the C-suite all the way down. But really, what are we trying to do with the optics platform? What is the potential opportunity when we're using AI to drive better decisions for our manufacturing process? Really, the big goal with this system was how do we improve decision making? How do we improve and enable operators and management to utilize all this information, all of this data, to better improve their process? One thing we have with all these manufacturing assets is a lot of information. So how do we distill this down into actionable insights that these customers, that these operators, that these foremen or management can use so that they're making more intelligent decisions to better drive their process? And so from that, we've really started to identify using this information to make real-time predictions, real-time measurements, real-time estimates of some of these key parameters that operators and management rely on to drive their asset. And when we're using this information in real time, instead of delayed or feedback control, we're able to make better decisions with it. There we go. So on this slide, we kind of talk about what are the steps for digitization? How did we start with where we are and how did we get to where we are now? When we set out to build optics and understand what we needed to do with this solution, we needed a problem first. And as I just kind of touched on earlier, one of the biggest problems we currently have in the paper-making space is we are using these manual lab tests. It is a continuous process, so you have to stop the process to get a snapshot of what's going on with the system. So we wait 45 minutes, hour and a half, sometimes even longer for some of these snapshots for information that, we do our best to make sure it is as accurate as possible, but it is a manual test. It is looking at 2 inches of paper and testing it and understanding what that value is and controlling a huge asset off of just that small snapshot. So with that, people run with significant insurance policies to make sure that their system doesn't go where they don't want it to. You see often people will not react to a high or low test. They'll wait for a second one because they're not sure if it was accurate enough. You'll see often that we'll run with excess strength or excess chemistry just because you never know if that next test could swing a little lower than they expected and make off quality product that in the end is goal number 1 not to. So what we can now do with this is we take this ocean of data that we have with this asset and we make a real-time measurement based on that data to let you know what's going on with your process every 30 seconds. And when you have this feedback every 30 seconds, we can make more intelligent, smaller, tailored decisions to optimize and adjust different raw materials to make sure that we're getting closer to target, we're hitting target, and when we miss by less. So that's really this next step. You're using just a antiquated feedback, hindsight look at what's going on with these lab tests. Well, now we have a real-time measurement that's in the hands of the operators so that they can be making more proactive, more feed-forward decisions to make sure that they're keeping their process where they need to. The biggest problem that we identified with this system, though, was the operators are very busy. They have competing priorities. And when they're focusing on other things, sometimes there's just more value that can be extracted if we start to incorporate a controller and an AI piece that really is focused 100% on making sure it is optimizing this resource. And so that is what the autonomous control piece is. It is a feedback control loop looking at this prediction, real-time prediction of this measurement, and it is causing an optimization of some of these key levers, be it chemistry, be it furnish, be it a refiner or basis weights, information that is important to drive our process. We use this feedback control from the prediction to this raw material lever to optimize in real time these different key KPIs. So what's the difference? We've all used Excel or MATLAB to build a linear regression to understand, why one thing and how one thing correlates to another, and to hopefully make some intelligent inferences and decisions based off this. The problem is, paper making in general and manufacturing for the larger umbrella is much more complex than that. It's not just a series of linear relationships that you can understand and quickly, type into Excel and output your number, and all of a sudden you know exactly where you need to be running. Sometimes there's big drivers that are important, such as refining or furnish, and then other times things shift and change, and you need to understand different aspects of the machine at different times to make sure that we're making an accurate decision all the time. And that's really where optics starts to shine. It understands more than just a linear relationship. It's looking at nonlinear, binary, just complex understanding, and it will transition. It will use linear sometimes as well. But making sure that it is looking at all different aspects and pulling in what it needs to at any given time differentiates itself from a lot of these other off the box or out of the box soft sensor opportunities. So once we'd identified this problem, we had to go out and build the relationships to, try and solve it. First and foremost, we work with an industry-leading artificial intelligence supplier, Process Miner. They do the guts of the data science. They have the information and IT skills to build and design this platform and build and design the algorithm and information behind it to provide an industry-leading prediction as well as the background behind it. But we also needed, a feed forward-looking customer, a looking forward customer, excuse me, like St. Croix that wanted to continue running at the cutting edge. And that's really what we got in this partnership. Their look is to continue making the best quality tissue that they can. And with this solution, it's helped them optimize some of the raw material costs so that they can continue driving the optimization that they need to. So this is really what we're trying to do, as we continue to move into this AI space, as we continue to move into Industry 4.0, how do we continue to improve business and culture and shift it from our more antiquated looks to a more, connected, interconnected, sharing information kind of space. We don't want to be just looking at every different little aspect, but how do we combine these all together using data to make sure that we are driving intelligent decisions that aren't based on hunches, that aren't based on, the one time it happened back in 1997, so I'm going to always run my chemistry here, even though there's significant opportunity, and really move us forward into a better decision-making space. So this is how the feedback control for the optics prediction works. First and foremost, as I mentioned, this runs on live data. So there's a connection to the mill historian. The information is then transported to the AWS cloud, where a majority of the computation, all of the number crunching is done. And it's all distilled down into a very simple measurement. So if we're looking at wet tensile per se, what you get back on your screen is, and as you can kind of see in this small little browser, it is a number, and it's the same number that you're supposed to be seeing coming out of your lab. And you're supposed to use that exactly like you would be using the number to come out of your lab. And so the next step that we've talked about, the autonomous control piece, is now using an IoT controller, the Solenis OnGuard controller, and using this real-time prediction and a feedback control loop with a chemistry lever to optimize that lever and drive that KPI, that prediction, where we want it to go. The really cool thing about the system is, we can decide where that is. So, today we want to drive to a 35, tomorrow we want to drive to a 34. We can quickly understand and help cut out some of the noise because it is an automated control loop. It is AI doing its best. It's not there's no human error based on what's going on with that system. It is very much just a computer doing its best job to optimize this lever and this KPI to get to where we were trying to go. So all of that forms this control loop that is the optics autonomous control piece. So these next parts, this is really the case study of the wet tensile prediction from St. Croix and how we've been using it to control the Solenis chymine, which is a wet strength resin that they use on their towel production. These results are all from 2020. So we started in June of 2020, and I think Jesse will highlight this in some of the recordings. But it's 6 months of operator control compared to 6 months of optics control. They continue to run the optics control on their chymine, and as we'll get to in later parts of the presentation, we're now exploring other opportunities. So I will mute myself for this part, and we will go through some of Jesse's recordings.
In this next section, we'll discuss how we've applied this tool in our tissue operation. The first example is its simplest form, a live prediction. This allows us to take a process output that we otherwise can't continuously monitor and see a live up-to-date predictor of its value. In the upper right, you can see the dashboard of this example, showing machine direction tensile and wet tensile predictions. For us, these update every 15 seconds, so we can see and react to process changes much more rapidly than if we were waiting for that lab test result each hour. Now, what this does is it gives us better insight. If I make an adjustment in my process, did I see the change that I expected? I can monitor the live prediction and see if the move I made brought me closer to target almost right away. The second graphic illustrates another way that we gain insight. Behind these predictions lies a complex model that Matt talked about that uses real data tags to run its analysis. Here in that graphic, it's showing the top 6 variables that are driving the prediction. So when I see a change on that prediction that I don't fully understand, can I use these to identify what else in the process might be changing and react accordingly? And then if we take this one step further, as Matt described earlier in the good, better, best scenarios, can we apply a closed loop supervisory process control in some of these applications to even further this? So one thing that's really important to highlight here, a major key to the successful implementation of this was communication. Getting the right information out there was critical to obtain buy-in. This is a really big change in an operation, so without the buy-in from the team to at least give it an honest effort, a lot of what we've learned up to this point would not have been possible. And I do want to highlight this is a developmental tool. There's been a lot of work put into it, and there's a lot more to do. From an operational perspective, these are some of the challenges that we've faced. The first one being, is it accurate? This advanced analytics program is promising to do something that hasn't been possible before. There's naturally going to be a lot of doubt in scenarios like that. But if you can put it to use, prove it in trials, then eventually that doubt will fade. There was curiosity on how this would affect individuals' roles. I was asked by lab technicians if this meant that we wouldn't need to test Tensile or wet Tensile in the lab anymore. That's not the case, as the analysis actually needs and uses the lab tests to check itself for error. I was also asked by machine operators if this controller was going to just run the machine for them. Again, the answer is no. It's simply just another tool in the toolkit that lets us be more efficient, try to improve, and maybe focus on bigger fish. And right now we do operate in an on-off mode. Each model is made uniquely for certain grades, so part of development is focused on creating models that encompass all grades more easily. In the next section, we're going to discuss a few specific examples and the benefits we've observed from them. Here we developed a wet tensile prediction for a towel grade and then applied an autonomous control of the wet strength chemistry based upon that live prediction. For those of you that aren't familiar with histograms, they show you a distribution of your data. The top of the curve that you see is the average. And then if the curve is wide, your data is more variable than it would be on a narrower curve. So in blue, we have our baseline historical data showing how operators controlled wet strength dosage. They would get a lab test every hour, and if the wet tensile got too low, they would increase the dosage set point, and vice versa. As you can see on the table to the right, they averaged about a 4.6 kilogram per ton and had a pretty wide range of dosages. In red, we're using the live prediction with the autonomous controller of the dosage. In this scenario, the operators are fully hands-off. You can see the controller averages about a 3.5 kilogram per ton dosage, reducing the chemical usage by about 24%, which is pretty significant. This chart includes over a year's worth of production data for this grade. You can see the numbers on the right. This is about adding up to about 1,500 reels worth of tissue production. So what makes this even better is on this slide, we show the actual wet tensile lab results from the same time period. The wet tensile target is 1,100 grams per 50 millimeter. And you can see in the operator scenario that they averaged above target at about 1272 with a fair amount of variability. If they tried to reduce the chemistry to get to target, the blue curve would have shifted to the left and we would have increased our reject losses. The autonomous controller averaged 1164, much closer to target with a little bit less variability. And the reason it was able to run lower was exactly for that reason, is it was able to do it with less variability, having no more reject losses than the baseline. So not only did this autonomous controller reduce our chemical cost, but it reduced product variation and increased target adherence as well. In our second example, we describe how a live dry tensile prediction can be used to assist the challenging grade. Within a single process and with no other changes, softness and strength are inversely correlated when it comes to tissue. Typically, the premium soft bath products have low tensile properties compared to their rougher counterparts. This low strength can make premium bath difficult to run on a machine. On one end, if your strength gets too low, you can incur costs from running poorly. And on the other end, if your softness gets too low, you're going to create off quality. So normally, again, we have our lab test every hour to monitor how our tensile is changing. With advanced analytics, we have a continuous prediction that can be monitored. So as tensile changes, we can see it in real time and react more quickly, or react with better information to help us stay on target and more easily avoid those highs and lows of this challenging product. And the final example we'll show today is showcases a trial in which we use a live tensile prediction with an autonomous controller that will adjust the percent of softwood in the sheet, which is a major generator of tensile. So if the tensile prediction is high, the controller is going to remove softwood, or vice versa. Again, this is responding to a live prediction as opposed to the more infrequent lab test. So on the top graph, you can see the prediction alongside the discrete lab tests, which are the black dots. Those same lab tests are shown in green on the bottom graph. And for now, just ignore the red line. Coming into the trial, you can see that the prediction was indicating tensile was high, despite a low lab test. At this point, we turn the controller on. So if we look at the bottom graph, you can see when we turn the controller on that it starts to remove softwood in yellow based upon the fact that the prediction is running on the high side. Without the controller, seeing that low test, myself or an operator might have decided to actually add softwood or do nothing. But it turns out that the controller in the prediction was right, because it took softwood out. The second test came in above target again and actually matched almost perfectly with the prediction. So from there on, it continued to take out a little more softwood, and you can see the next several lab tests all come in pretty close and are averaging right around target. So finally, the red line shows broke percentage, which impacts tensile but is adjusted for other reasons. This is just to show that the controller worked even with other typical process changes occurring. This trial showcases how the autonomous control has the ability to make more informed process decisions.
So appreciate Jesse for providing that. He's been a great help. St. Croix has been a very strong customer and visionary with this technology. So I'll kind of wrap up some of the information around what we continue to be doing and what the next steps forward are with the optics platform. As you saw, we started with chemistry, a functional chemistry, and we've quickly branched out to bigger and better value opportunities. But first and foremost, these chemistries are very easily optimized with this system, and it works very well with what's going on, be it a wet strength resin or a sizing or a dry strength resin, such as a GPAM. But some of these next step opportunities that we're specifically looking at for St. Croix tissue, it is now automatically turned on every single time they turn on a towel grade. So any of their towel production is autonomously controlled when they trigger it for this machine. We also now control all 100% of their grade availability. So, as long as they have run this grade in the past, it's something that we can confidently control their wet strength chemistry too. We're also now looking at other opportunities. Once they've had this first system built and understand how it works, it has really opened the door to what are the other pains that are driving Jesse's bottom line that he needs help with. Is it a freeness solution where he doesn't have a good real-time measurement of what's going on with this freeness and relies on a shift test Is it something around his softness, which is kind of that golden goose that we hear a lot of in the tissue making space? Or is it something else? And then finally, Jesse hinted on the, at any given time, our prediction is using, a few key parameters to drive what's going on with the system, maybe 10 or 15, 20 tags at the most, to understand and make a real-time measurement of what's going on. What we've really done is taken the next step and tried to use that information to develop a root cause analysis, essentially. Understand what's driving the shifts in this key KPI. It doesn't have to be tied to a prediction. It could be something else. It could be a lab value. It could be a sensor, information, as long as the data is there. And then tying that into, correlated values or correlated tags that likely are causing the shift, that are running outside of where we expect, to quickly distill down a list of tags that can help him and his team go troubleshoot what's going on with the system. So, let's understand, we've been running in control for the past 3 months, and we've been using 4 kilograms per ton. Well, this week we used 5. Well, now we have the ability to utilize this tool to kind of start to dig into what is likely the drivers that is causing us to use more chemistry, or very much the opposite. We've been using 4 and we're using 3.5 for the past 2 weeks. What's the driver? Is it, do we have better furnish coming in? Is it the new refiner plates? Well, this is what the system is really set in place to help do, help identify what are the current drivers for this specific KPI that we're looking at that are causing shifts and changes in the process. I went too far, sorry. So at that point, this has kind of been our presentation that we've shared, like I said, at TAPI as well as with y'all today. I appreciate everyone's time. I'd like to open up, I guess, the floor for questions. Turn on the camera.
Hi, Matt. There he is, if anybody can see his video. So just as Matt had mentioned, go ahead and type your questions in the chat panel. I see there's already some coming in, so you may be getting a notification, and that might help find the chat panel for you. I think, Matt, are you able to see the chat panel?
Yes. I'll start with Catherine's. Catherine asked, has optics been used yet for biological control, predicting how much biocide needs to be fed, or how often to control bacteria growth in processed water or bacterial spores in furnished paperboard? Also, is optics used for the paper side of our business, or will it be allowed to use for cooling towers? So first, to answer your first part of the question, we have 2 sites that we're currently working on for this biological control piece. The most important thing for the optics prediction is it has to be tied to a lab value, and I think you heard Jesse, mention that as well. So there needs to be some sort of calibration or some sort of test that is connecting it to the asset that we're looking at. So, is this bug counts? Is this ATP? Some of this information. What we're initially looking at is VFA specifically. So if we're able to provide a prediction that lets you more accurately adjust your biocide usage, how often you're feeding it, your cycles, excuse me. Can we help keep the VFA in a control system, that will help us prevent outbreaks as well as make sure we're not overfeeding chemistry. So this is absolutely something we're looking into. It is something that is currently being worked on. I don't have any results to share with you at this moment, but we'd hope to have something within the next 3 to 6 months. The second side asking for, is it just in paper side? No, we've also looked at some sludge dewatering, some IWT stuff. It is a data-driven solution. It is agnostic to whatever it's looking at. So if the data is there, we have the stage gates and the tools to understand, can we make a good prediction and can we drive value with it? So if the information and the data is there, absolutely, I think it's worth an opportunity to look at, and please reach out to Beth Ann or myself. Alberto's question is, which areas has the system been used besides wet tensile and wet strength? Any use in coloration? So what we've really started on, focused on to begin with, was wet strength resin. This was one of our first examples that you see here. We also have now places running up in coated paperboard as well as SAC. So we continue to look to optimize a lot of the functional chemistries is where we've started. Is that a GPAM as well? It is something we're looking at. But if there's an opportunity to tie a chemistry into this real-time prediction, it's something worth looking into. And so we've absolutely had conversations around the colorations, but our first focus has been these functional chemistries. Once one is inhibited, though, as you saw here, or in place, it quickly moves to other opportunities. So can we use this to optimize furnish, like you see with the St. Croix example? There are a lot of different opportunities, and so just making sure we're picking good value-driving opportunities is really the only caveat to if it's a good idea or not.
Matt, could you just quickly just go through the list of KPIs and quality metrics that we've actually predicted in addition to wet tensile and wet tear?
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. So first we started with wet strength resin, but we've also, wet tensile. We have wet tear. All of the strength tests, stiffy, burst, compression, as well as functional tests such as HST and Cobb. We've looked at solids. So for sludge dewatering, understanding, percent solids around that, as well as VFA, as I just highlighted, be it, a butyric, an overall, but really we touched on it earlier is, it's a agnostic data-driven solution. So I'm confident we can make, if the data is there and the lab test or there's a value to be tied to one of these tests, I'm confident we can make a good prediction for it. And I have the ability to check and see if we can or not. So if there's an opportunity that you see or a value driver that's bugging you at your mill, please reach out, and I think we can work to drive a solution for you. So Clive's question is, any idea percentage of softwood reduction was achieved during the furnish optimization? Sure. So, this is still being developed with St. Croix, but, through some of our initial trials, we're seeing between, 3 and 5% overall. Sometimes it would add softwood. Sometimes we had significantly less softwood. What the system is really good at doing is providing the correct amount of softwood or whatever lever we're looking to optimize at that time. So as the process shifts and moves, so does the usage. But overall, for the trials that we've run, it would average, 3 to 5%, I would say. Will this optics work in response, in delayed response and process control? So I guess let me try and clarify that question and make sure I clarify it correctly. Are you asking, I guess, around system lag? If we're having lags in the process, if we're making too many reactive moves, we could likely inhibit or increase variation because we're not taking into account this lag or this delay. The way the system is set up is to make sure that we are not making moves quicker than the expected impact of those moves. So, the prediction, essentially, wherever you're making it, is looking at, what's going on at this minute. In the case of paper making, what's being made on my reel right now? What is the wet tear right now being built on this reel? And so we're not going to be making, when we're making chemistry moves, they're fairly quick, so we can make a little more fast-paced adjustments. But when we're making these softwood moves, they're a little more delayed. So the way the system works, it's not just a continuous move of this lever. It makes an adjustment of a step size that's determined by the customer, as well as a frequency that's determined by the customer. And we work with the customer to identify that frequency and make sure that it is not too rapid, so we're not dealing with this delayed response that would increase variation that you see a lot of times in some of these process controls. How do we initiate projects with optics? Do you have a formal process to get projects in a queue? Catherine, I would recommend reaching out to Paul. You just heard him, Paul Valek, on the phone, or myself. Or my email's on the screen as well. If you're a local Solenis employee, if not, please contact your Solenis local team, or please reach out to us directly, and we can get you in the right, push you in the right direction. So what Beth Ann just threw up on the screen here is, how long it kind of takes us for implementation. As I mentioned, the first step is really getting the connection to the data historian. That really starts our process. Once we have that live connection, it's about a 6-week period from that connection to when we would have a ready-to-use product that you could log in, see the real-time prediction of the KPI that you're looking for, and start to work to optimize whatever we're looking at. So it's a fairly rapid process that we can deliver this product. But the big thing as well is some of these stage gates that we've talked about. First and foremost, we look at the health of the data. The data has to be healthy enough to support a prediction, so we understand how the distributions are laid across your target zones, how they correlate to some of these other key levers and distributions. It helps us understand, first, is the data healthy enough to predict, and second, where the value target is. Are you running over target like we saw at St. Croix because of your operating window? And if you tried to drive down to target, you would increase reject. Are you running slightly under target, but still have significant optimization potential over target that we can help cut off while maintaining your current, system average? There's a lot of different ways to drive value, but putting this under AI control and making sure that it's always looking and driving to the best possible dosage rate is very valuable in itself. It gets significant positive feedback from all of our autonomous control customers in the sense that, it's an autopilot that just helps their operators perform their jobs better. It is a tool in their arsenal that lets them, turn it on and focus on other things. And just like any other control loop in a paper machine, they have the ability to transition it back to operator control and take the reins. Maybe they're making a large grade change, or maybe all of a sudden there's a 30-point kappa swing or something crazy that's going on, and they know they need to make an adjustment. Well, the system is good at reacting, towards those things. But in the case that the operator needs to take the reins, he always has the ability to just flick a switch. He's back into control. And then once he's ready to put it back into autopilot, just turn it right back onto optics control. So Clive asked how many process variables were handled by the system for wet Tensile. So this is fairly consistent for all of our predictions, not just wet Tensile. We look between 100 and 200 variables. We don't really want to go over 200. We're happy to go under 100. It really just matters, on how much information that we need around the asset. What's really good about the system, and what I kind of touched on, in one of these slides earlier, the process is very, very interrelated. And because of this, that's why I don't need your 20,000 tags that you're looking at for a paper machine. I just need the 200. A great starting point is, if you have an Excel poll that you would pull to go troubleshoot your dry test, your dry Tensile, those 70, 80 tags that you pull are probably a great starting point for what we're trying to do with a prediction. We want information from, stock prep to real, stuff that gets further back in the system, we include for the root cause piece. But because we are trying to make a real-time prediction, we want information coming as close to real time as possible. So information from, the furnishes, as well as the refining, what's going on the table and the presses is very important and continues to get drawn in. But overall, it's about 150 tags for this specific prediction. But any given time, 25 are important enough to be driving what's going on with the prediction. So Michael asks, priorities change from week to week. How flexible is the system to say optimize wet strength one day and softest the next? So this is a great point, Michael, and kind of the focus on what we're trying to do with the system. It is very tailored to one specific aspect. If we want to optimize wet strength to a wet tensile prediction, let's build that system, get it prepared, and let it run with that. If once that problem is solved, let's target the next problem. Cut that out and make sure that we understand what the issue is and build a solution for that specifically. So our goal is not to be moving the bullseye week to week. Our goal is to find a problem, provide a solution, iterate, and go on to your next problem. So predictions in the closed loop system itself are very much tailored to a specific issue. We can provide a lot of different predictions and we can provide a lot of different solutions for a lot of different problems. But the goal is not to have it look at one thing one week and then something the next. It's to have maybe two things that are looking at those two problems all the time. So Gabby asks, how good or adjustable is optics with handling fluctuations or process upsets, like startups and shutdowns? Hey, Gabby. So the process, as we kind of highlighted in one of Jesse's slides, is very good at understanding what's going on as things move, shift, and change. That's why we can drive more value when we use this prediction to control something, is because it is looking and understanding what some of these shifts are coming through and able to make changes more quickly than what the operator would have seen. So, operators do have some understanding. If I increase refining or I change my broke percentage, I expect my test to do X or Y. And the better ones will be proactive and make a move to react or to be proactive to that change. Some of the other operators that are still learning, might wait for a lab test to come in before they make a change. What we're doing with the system is we have that real-time estimate of what that change did to these tests, and we're reacting to it already. So like some of your best operators that understand how these changes exactly impact it, that's exactly what optics is doing as well. To highlight, though, your second part, this is a data-driven solution. So if you change and start running a 150-pound sheet and you've run 50-pound sheet for the past 3 years, and that's all the data we're looking at, that does start to make where the system would struggle. If you've never been there before, it's not a good place to be using a data-driven solution. But the cool thing about it is I have the ability to understand that very quickly with some of our metrics that we look at on the back end of the prediction. And we can quickly highlight, and work with your local rep as well as yourself to understand, hey, we're building a new grade here. Let's use the insights of what the analytics is trying to drive with this, but let's get some more data before we start letting it control something in a feedback control loop. Our next question, how difficult is it to integrate optics into customer processes or customer process variables in terms of input data variables? So, we have yet to come across a system that didn't have data healthy or enough data to support a prediction. The biggest need, because it is a data-driven solution, is a connection to that live historian. So, if the customer does not have significant historic data, and when I say significant, we typically look for 6 months to a year. We've been able to do less, so I'm not saying exclude them if they have less than that, but it becomes more of a case-by-case basis to understand, what the capabilities are of the historian that they currently have. We have to have the ability to get that information in a 15-second, 30-second feedback so that we can be providing this real-time prediction. We're not pulling all tags every 15 or 30 seconds. We are pulling just a specific amount of tags. So it is very small, packets that are being sent to the cloud, very, very low drain on the system. We're talking kilobytes here kind of thing. So if that's a concern, we have yet to run into any problems from that side of it. But if you have more of a specific question, I'd highlight reaching out to us and maybe we can kind of discuss more in detail. But it's not a difficult process. It is very much just a typical IT setup where we have a virtual machine on the local server that is connected to their historian and then communicates to the AWS cloud and provides the information that we need. A lot of good questions. Absolutely.
So it looks like our chat panel is slowly running out of questions here. So I'll just open it up again for anyone else. If you might have any additional questions, now is the time to ask. If not, as Matt has mentioned a couple times, please feel free to reach out to Matt or myself. Our information is here on this screen, and we would be able to help you with some questions offline here. Again, if you have any questions, I'll kind of give us a few seconds here to capture those in the chat panel.
Yeah, and I'll highlight really quick, Beth Ann. We've talked about St. Croix Tissue. This is a light dry crate machine that we're running on both of their machines. We have multiple coated paperboard machines now that we are running optics on, and we continue to build out our case studies. So if you'd like more information, those are also on Insight, or we can share those with you directly. But we continue to build out success stories, and we're excited to continue to do so. If there's more specific questions, happy to answer them.
And to follow up on some of the information Matt just gave out too. So for any of the people on the line, if you need more information, again, reach out to either of us, or your local Solenis rep would be a great place to start too. You can find additional information on solenis.com/optics. And also, again, a copy of this recording will be shared within the next 48 hours or so until we get it downloaded and edited. I'd like to thank you all for attending. It's been I think a very interesting session with a lot of really great questions. Thank you, Matt, for your time today, and thank you everyone for joining. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us. With that, I think I think we can go ahead and close out the meeting. Thank you everyone for attending.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Beth Ann.